Do you think that the president took advantage of their visits, both Theresa May and Angela Merkel, to represent Nigeria's interests?
Well, to some extent, yes. Perhaps we haven't got the details yet of what transpired. You know, for this kind of bilateral discussions, the real discussions takes place perhaps behind the scene. You know, the technocrats will have discussed. Some MOUs were signed, because I know that even with the visit of Theresa May, there were some discussions around ICT. And there was MOUs that were also signed to promote ICT cooperation between Nigeria and the United Kingdom. So a lot of things, I'm sure, will have taken place at the technical level, rather than just the ceremonial thing that we see between the president and the head of the governments of those countries.
All right, let's get back to the GDP figures according to the NBS Q2 figures, as a matter of fact. And let's focus on agriculture, oil and gas, and the manufacturing sectors. When you look at those figures very closely, should Nigerians be concerned about what truly a GDP means to them?
Well, we should be concerned because the GDP is a measure of the tempo of economic activities in an economy. And when your GDP is slowing down, it's an indication that the volume of economic activities is slowing. And once you have that, it begins to impact on income, it begins to impact on poverty, it begins to impact on employment. So that is why it is important. But for the average Nigerian and for those of us in business, what is most important in all of this is the quality of the business environment, the cost of doing business, the quality of our institutions, the financial environment, and the regulatory environment. Because right now, the major challenge that businesses face is the cost of operations. And this is arising basically from these traditional problems of infrastructure, of power, diesel, and logistics. This has remained a major problem. So the kind of decline we are seeing in the real sector, particularly in manufacturing, is likely to have been driven by the fact that the cost of energy in this economy is still very high. The cost of logistics is also very high. Many of the trucks that we see on the road moving products from one point to the other, they are all running on diesel. And diesel is very expensive. We have this Apapa port gridlock. It's also a major factor because these are the ports that serve the entire country. So what is happening, there also impacts on the performance of the manufacturing sector.
That's manufacturing, but if we have to look at agriculture, 22% of GDP is contributed from that sector, with a high employment rate, I must say, also growing by rather meager 1.19% in Q2. Surely this is a slow pace, but what does this mean? Will a farmer, for instance, see more money coming into his pocket?
You see, in agriculture, you talked about the number of jobs that are being created. But there are jobs and there are jobs. The quality of jobs being created in agriculture, particularly at the primary level, is nothing to write home about. So when we talk about jobs, we also need to qualify what kind of jobs. Agric is contributing, yes, over 22% of GDP. The oil and gas sector is contributing less than 10% of GDP. You cannot compare the quality of jobs in the oil and gas sector to the quality of jobs in agriculture. So that speaks to the productivity in those sectors. So we should not just be looking at the numbers, we should also be looking at the quality. As we speak, some of the poorest set of economic players in this economy are the farmers. Those who get the benefit of agricultural sector are perhaps those who are playing at the higher level of the value chain of agricultural sector. Those who are doing marketing, transportation, packaging, export, those are the people making the money. So we still have very big issue at the primary level of agriculture. So
what must we do?
Big productivity problems.
What then must we do at the agricultural sector to ensure that we have that satisfactory impact that will suggest to you, for instance, that the agricultural sector is pulling that weight and having those job figures, quality jobs this time around, up?
Even before we go into that, we know what the situation is now. We know the impact of the security situation on agriculture. The herdsmen clashes, the Boko Haram. We know what impact it has had on the farming communities. That is a major factor. There's also the factor of climate change. Climate change is a major factor as we speak, affecting productivity in the sector. So beyond that, we need to also be looking at what we can do to improve productivity. A lot of efforts have been made in the area of finance, Anchor Borrowers Program, intervention funds, but we need to address some of the fundamental issues. We need to mechanize agriculture. Over 80% of agricultural practices today are still the traditional ways of farming. They are still the primitive use of hoes and cutlasses and manual processing and all of that. Unless we're able to transform those basic processes of production at the primary level, throwing money at it may not actually solve the problem. Then we also need to deal with issues of infrastructure, because you cannot deal with agri in isolation of infrastructure.
But what
you need
about
to
oil and
move
gas?
products from the farm, from the rural areas to the city, to the market, to the manufacturing site, and so on and so forth.
Let me get your thoughts on oil and gas, because it has also recorded very dismal performance in Q2. But in trying to ensure that the oil and gas sector remains a viable area where more players can play, would you subscribe to, for instance, having some of the companies listed on the stock exchange?
Well, it will be a good idea if some of those companies are listed on the stock exchange, particularly the upstream sectors. But again, the policy environment needs to be right. Right now, we have seen the kind of setback we are suffering in the area of the petroleum industry bill. You know, it's a major, unless we we reform that sector, we continue to have issues.
I'm afraid that that's the much we can take. I must thank you, Muda Yusuf, the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
When we return, we'll focus on the outcome of the APC NEC meeting. Stay with us.